Hey, just for everybody, we'd love to just share that it's awesome to have everybody join. To the extent that folks can throw their videos on, that would be awesome. As I feel like I say every time I'm doing one of these events, like we love talking, but we love talking to the void less. So the more that y'all can engage, the more this will be fun. Yes, and definitely check the chat for Leland's just doing this one-time like anniversary code stuff. So it's just free money. So I would use it. Cool. Let's wait maybe one more second here. Folks get settled. All right, Alice. Ready to roll?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, y'all. Again, thank you all for joining. If you want, feel free to throw in the chat where you're calling from. We have a slide for this, but I always find it's fun for people to engage. So throw where you're calling in from in the chat and Zoom. We always get a crazy range of folks.
I'm coming in from Boston, in case anybody else is as well. New York, Tampa, Colombia, welcome. India, Monterey, California. Wow, we've got such a wide range. Nigeria, let's go.
Have we had any repeats at all? I don't think we've had a single
I don't
repeat.
think we have. We've had repeated states, but all right, let's go. Danya, Boston. I actually think I know this Danya.
Good deal.
North Carolina.
All right. Cool, guys. Keep dropping those in the chat. We're here all day. So thank you again. We're excited. Our goal with this is to make this fun and engaging, but also to give you guys some tactical advice for every single piece of the application. So Alice and I are coming at this from different angles, and we'll do the quick thing where we talk about ourselves, but just know that our focus is on just trying to give away this free knowledge and kind of do more of a level the playing field kind of event. And feel free to jump in and interrupt us with questions at any point. This is meant to be super interactive. Okay, Alice, you go first. I'm forcing you.
All right, let's do it. Well, again, thank you guys for coming, and we'll echo Ben in saying that this event is really to kind of share knowledge and make an MBA at GSB accessible to everyone. So a little bit about me. I'm coming out of 5 years in investments, particularly in real estate, private equity. Before that, I was doing credit investing. I'm originally from Haiti. I was born there, but I grew up in Connecticut, and then went to Williams College for undergrad. I'm also a Consortium fellow. I'm an MLT fellow. If you're an MLT fellow, shout out. And if you don't know what MLT or Consortium is, I'm happy to talk about either of those. And yeah, currently I'm a VC fellow at Necessary Ventures. So if you also have questions about VC, ask me about that.
Awesome.
I'll popcorn to Ben.
Very cool. As always, I feel like every time I meet someone going GSB, it's just like they kind of do all the things. So awesome. From my side, I'm from Queens, New York. So anybody also from that area, please drop it in the chat. It makes me way too excited. I went to WashU for undergrad. Kind of feel like I did a pretty random walk through the first several years career-wise in some respect, even if I've touched on some more traditional paths. So did philosophy, neuroscience, econ there. Let's go. All right, Chen. Love to see it. That makes me thrilled. Like that'll power me for the next 45 minutes. Thank you. And then so after WashU, went to McKinsey for a couple of years in Chicago, and then moved over to do policy at the mayor's office under Rahm Emanuel. Did a range of stuff from infrastructure to workforce development, even some corporate and biz dev work. So just learned a ton there. And then went off to GSB for the MBA. Now I am running a chess startup called TownSquare Chess. You can kind of think of it basically like Leland for chess. And I'm also starting this project called Staying Human, which is kind of pulling back a little bit on the many of the trends in AI and asking like, what are the ways that we can change our lives and experiences for the better in the future? But for today, y'all, I think it's just worth remembering like this platform, it's in general, beyond just ourselves, I think Leland is evolving into a place where if you have a goal, you want to change your career in some form or fashion, Leland is really designed to help you just move that next step forward. And for some, it's several steps. And I actually recognize amazingly some of the faces on on the side there from so many different walks of life. But Leland's doing events like this all the time. Stay tuned. At the very least, subscribe to their free resources. Check out things like Leland Plus, where there's just a huge content library for whatever your goals are. Alice, any other thoughts here on things that I might have missed?
No, but Leland is awesome, and I wish I'd been using it as like, an applicant. So sign up for a free account if you haven't yet. And yeah, our coaches are amazing. That's all I can say.
That's great. And I will say as well, like when I was applying, I would have loved to have a fraction of this stuff available, because I just like feel like it really simplifies a lot of the process and gets a lot of the noise out of the way. But okay, to today, we're gonna kind of take you through a range of different things, from facts and figures to our personal experiences. And the goal is just to give you a more holistic understanding of what GSB can be, the range of different outcomes that you possibly could have. And frankly, I think Alice and I are at different stages, and we can speak to different parts of the process with different levels of fluency as well. But I think we can also both, to some extent, really speak to just about everything. We can start here. Alice, any first thoughts? I'm happy to jump in with some analysis, but like I think like generally speaking, there's some pretty cool things that define GSB.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my first thought is don't let the numbers scare you or prevent you from applying. I definitely wasn't above or even at a lot of these numbers. So while there are some pretty incredible stats here, I know people were very anxious about test scores and GPA and stuff. I would see this as more of like an average, as opposed to kind of the end all be all of applying to GSB.
Yeah, totally true. Also can't second enough. Do not let numbers scare you away. My people that I know very closely from GSB, like many of them had a range of different GMAT scores. They're averages for a reason. And if they wanted to just like rank sort by GPA or GMAT, they would do that. They wouldn't bother with all the essays and recommendations and make you do all this work.
Agree. We have a question that I think we could actually probably both tackle on career trajectory before and after the MBA. And I know we kind of touched on it in our quick intros, but I'm happy to touch on pivots. I think I've pivoted a couple of times. So I was coming from real estate PE background. I'd been doing that for 4 years, and my entire application was about pivoting into mental health startups. So did not have a background in mental health or healthcare at all, or in startups, but really substantiated that aspiration with kind of other things that I had done in my life that show that I could do something like that. And I also backed it up with just my personal experiences and my passion for it. And so one of the things that I had done in my life was I'd started a run club in Boston. And it's not directly related, but it showed that, I at least had that kind of thinking, and was passionate about that space to some aspect. And yeah, so field, I majored in psychology, went into finance. How did I make my pivots? Those were really network driven. And I think and Ben, maybe you could speak to this, but I feel like a lot of the people that I've spoken to who are later on in their GSB career or out of that, it's usually, okay, I found my first job out of business school through my network, like very network driven. And that was my experience prior to an MBA as well. And I was open about that in my application. I'm first generation, and I was really just taking on opportunities that felt like a time to learn and kind of learn different things that I didn't have access to growing up.
Great, really well said. I'll just dovetail with onto you by saying I had a slide on my why Stanford, so I'll talk about that specifically. But I also I'm a person from a random town in Queens. That's right on the border of Queens and Long Island. So no one from my hometown knew what the heck. I don't even know what if I told them what the Stanford GSB, they'll be like, I don't even know what that stands for. And I personally had no clue what it was until honestly the day I got to campus. I had some general gist of it, but I feel like there were a handful of really, really helpful voices in my ear from just from the mayor's office, just kind of helping me think through my next steps. And then personally, I had 1 or 2 friends from McKinsey that, even though I was really late to the game and really late in the process, they just kind of helped me simplify what I needed to do to get through the damn app. in some respects. Just do the test, how to do it well, and how to think through what are the right things to highlight in your application, and what's stuff they hear every day. And that's obviously what a lot of what like I think a coach would do for you via Leland. But just I feel like in some ways very fortunate to have just a couple people around me who were peers who kind of got it to some extent, and I didn't. So yeah, great questions. I think I want to also touch on a couple other things here too, which is just like I think you should notice that all these numbers like they skew high, but to some extent, this might be one of the better times to apply. You can get lost in the average GMAT. That the GRE score is obviously hovering around like 330, just below. GMAT's, I mean, the GPA is 3.7 plus. Okay, these are all solid numbers, but I also think it's worth looking at like an interesting relationship between the applicant's size and the class size, which I find funny because the class size on average is growing and the applicant pool on average is shrinking. So I don't know why that's exactly happening, but one decent hypothesis would be that this might be your best time to actually apply. Maybe a lot of people are running away from the application because they feel it's too competitive. Maybe some people are just less interested. Who knows? But those two facts together can't be a bad thing for your application. That's for sure. So just something to think about as we kind of crunch the numbers here. Also have these, which I think are encouraging. Alice, maybe I'll start here and then you can jump in. But
Yeah.
For me, like I'll be honest, like I think the most encouraging stat is the growth in the percentage of like actual U.S. minorities that are seeing representation in GSB's class. I personally just like I feel like I almost resonated with minority groups a little bit more just because like I showed up on campus with a couple $1,000 and I didn't really know what to do with it, and I didn't feel like it was a lot. So I do feel like there are a lot of people who came from backgrounds who I wouldn't even say minority, so to speak. I would just say like I could tell that I could resonate with people who money was an object for them. And it was a significant player in my time at GSB. And frankly, like I think the fuel to some respect, in some respect to the hustle that I kind of had throughout my GSB degree in terms of trying to build out a contracting business and things like that. So I think it's a really encouraging number, and it shows, I think, a dedicated effort, at least by admissions to some extent, to build that representation from the country itself. So I'll start there, but Alice, other thoughts?
Yeah, I think Stanford joining the consortium is also just so indicative of their commitment to, just diversity in general, in all different types of forms, right? And so, yeah, I think it is pretty, actually, I didn't realize it was like 29 to 50. That's like a really big jump in very little time. But yeah, it is really, and I think they're doing more with like the FGLI community as well, which was enticing to me. And yeah, no, I think it's great that we're kind of leaning in and opening up more space for, people who are a little bit different or who look different.
For sure. And the work experience is, I think, interesting, maybe a little bit too. Just, I think the idea with work experience tilting a little bit, it talked to me, Alice. I saw a reaction.
Well, it's all, I don't think 4.5 is that different from 5 personally, but yes, I think it is trending upwards, but even then, I think there are a lot of people who do 2 + 2 and like don't have a full 5 years of experience, or so I think I have a lot of clients who maybe have 2 to 3 years of experience, and I think as long as you can kind of show why business schools, why it's the right time now for you, or and I know a lot of people who are way over the 5 years, who are at like 9 years of experience and are still able to kind of have compelling applications and get into these schools. Yeah, I don't know why it has to be like 4 to 5 years as the average, but yeah. I don't know. I have like a thing about the whole like 5 years of experience, but
I do too. And as somebody who I walked onto campus at age 25, like I do feel like at times the folks that like had a couple years on me, just like they were at more mature life stages. They kind of had a little bit, right? Yeah, a little bit better understanding of what they wanted to me. But I would say that, yeah, you're right. Like 4.5 to 5 over a 6-year span, it could literally be just because they're diluting the 2 + 2 pool a little bit.
Yeah.
Or pulling from, yeah, exactly. So we're pulling from different industries a little bit more rather than less. So I think like in general, just know that like work experience should not like like just number of years is just not alone enough to justify applying or not applying.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so maybe we check. Okay, if there's no other questions in the chat, feel free to just drop them in.
Yeah, there's a question on consortium and management leadership for tomorrow, MLT for short. So can I speak about, the question is, could you please speak about consortium and MLT? So I'll start with MLT. MLT is well, they have a bunch of other programs, but their biggest program is the MBA program, and you have a cohort of about anywhere from like 100 to 300 other fellows who are applying to business school. And you have different coaches you have a coach based on your geography, and they're really walking you through the application process throughout. And one of the great things that they do are kind of on-site seminars where you get to be hosted by a business school. You get to start making connections with whether it's the current students or alumni of the school. So it's a really great opportunity to have a network of people who are doing it with you, and who also share the same life experiences. So it is for people of color, and so people who identify as in that category. And there is an application for it, and you need to have certain test scores, as well as a certain GPA in order to kind of apply for the program. There's an accelerated version. I think if you're applying for this cycle, you might be a little late for applying, but there is an accelerated version where you can kind of get in later on in the process, but you usually get it in January or February or so, and start in like March or April. In terms of consortium is kind of like the mission of consortium is to increase business representation, increase the representation of people of color in the world of business. And so you don't necessarily have to identify as someone who is of color, but you have to demonstrate that you are about the mission. So maybe you were part of a work experience, a company where you got to do a lot of this type of work, or you started a company where you got to do this, or you're in a lot of different organizations, so on and so forth. And so you can apply to business schools through consortium. There's a host of schools that are part of the consortium, Stanford included. Some of the other top schools are Tuck, and so many others, Kellogg, and Columbia. And you can it's like a streamlined application, a common app and it's cheaper for you to apply for like through consortium for all of these schools. And you have a consortium application where you answer specific questions that ask you, how did you demonstrate your commitment to the mission? You have a different like consortium recommender, and then you also have the separate business school application through the school itself. But it's a great organization to be a part of, also for the network. And they do a lot of work with career placement, and it starts really early. Like in June, we had an orientation program where we got to meet, well, it was actually canceled, but virtually we got to meet a lot of different companies to try and pre-recruit before we even got to campus. So those are the quick yeah, if there are any other questions, we can connect live. Feel free to book a 15-minute free with me, and I'm happy to talk about these things all day long. U.S. minorities include that are neurodivergent.
Alice, can I ask you really quickly?
Yeah.
What was the most, like, if you could pick for you in your case, what was the number one thing you felt like you got from both MLT and consortium?
Oh, I mean, the network. Like, I just hadn't, honestly, like, especially MLT, I just hadn't had people who looked like me who were doing incredible things across the country, also applying to business school. Like, there are just so many synergies, and I now know hundreds of people who are kind of doing just the most incredible things. And so for me, it was the people that I got to meet through MLT. And I mean, also, like, I think there was some level of the applications themselves that I don't think I would have been able to tackle without a coach, right? It's like things like timing, how to approach different questions, how to network. And so just having a coach, it was incredibly helpful.
Great. It's great.
Yeah.
It usually ends up being for a lot of these questions too. Like it does break down to humans and humans doing good stuff. So
For sure.
let's you had one more question you wanted to tackle in the chat, I think.
This question, what does representation of US minorities include that are neurodivergent? I don't know if you know that.
My hunch, just not because it shouldn't, but my hunch is that it probably doesn't. I'm guessing it's mostly just pure demographics in that analysis. Only because it usually takes a few years for the nomenclature to make its way into something like an application pool and an application's like criteria. So I'm guessing we're talking like just like race and demographic.
I agree with that.
Cool.
Oh, why Stanford?
Yeah, so you want to let's talk through because I think we'll both have probably different specific answers as we've kind of written out in our slides, but like I also think like I'm curious for you before we think about let's maybe break it down from we had our reasons for going, but let's also talk about like what were the kind of high level things that we gravitated to first. Like there are obviously some things about Stanford that like jump out and I think are worth talking through. In my case, it was like just I didn't think the personal and professional soft skills piece, like it didn't jump out to me. We'll talk more about it later and its impact, but I didn't apply for that reason. It didn't really cross my mind so much. I was really all in on they could actually help me facilitate a better understanding and or possible real world applications for socially impacted or public sector impact style organizations. At least that had some overlap with an entrepreneurial bend, something like that. That's really what I was looking for is just like just entering a machine that understood how to teach me the skills I needed to build something impactful or useful for the world. And that had been kind of my MO through the work that I had done so far. So I think it gelled really well. I honestly didn't understand what entrepreneurship even was. I didn't understand what startup stuff even was. I don't really like the word entrepreneurship. It's a little too French for me, but like I didn't get startup world. I didn't get VC. I didn't know what VC or private equity were. I had no idea. I've been in rooms before where I was just like, this is like a thing, I guess. People are using these words and they amount to sentences, but I don't know what any of them mean. So I was applying because startups cool, really cool industries. I could collaborate across places like the D School and make something real for the world. So that was my mindset going in. I'm curious, Alice, if you had like what your thoughts were.
Yeah, so I like I wanted to kind of debunk, like I wanted to know whether it was bullshit or not, if I'm being totally blunt. I had been in a lot of sessions with like Will Torres and, just every alum or current student I spoke to had this very like idealistic view of, like it's people walking around who, think they can do anything in the world and then they do that thing. Or like Stanford's like, yeah, here's the money, just like go out and do it. And I was like, this can't be like, it can't be this good. Like, what is the catch? And I got to visit and in November last year. And I was like, oh, holy shit, it is all true. Like everyone really is like walking around like thinking they can solve the world's biggest problems. And I wanted to be around that. And I think a lot of people say that, people at GSB love to talk and like love to talk about their feelings. And I think that was really, really attractive to me. I wanted to talk about things I wanted to be vulnerable and be very soft and solve something that to me is very vulnerable and very soft, like mental health. And I wanted to have like real conversations with people where I felt like I could be 100% myself. And there are only, I'd say, 2 schools where I felt like I could do that truthfully. And it came down to the 2 of them. And so, yeah, I think that's really what it was, the people more. I mean, that's so like cliche, but it really is the people that make up Stanford. And I think there are, I mean, of course, like my why Stanford had a bunch of like other things that are also on the slide, but I think like it really came down to how I felt when I stepped foot on campus and just how how the people at Stanford made me feel. That was very soft. I don't know if you resonate with that, but
Well, Are you asking me if I'm a sucker for like the you know the overcast like beautiful sunset like crisscrossing through Adobe? I think like I can handle that, and it sounds good.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
But I also was generally very attracted to like just being in a place where people are thinking, people are trying, people are actually putting things together and trying to make the world better. Now, is every person you meet at any school an angel? Of course not, right? There are going to be people you gel with and people you don't. But I do think your point around the human beings, and I think a lot of the soft stuff, it ends up being a lot more rewarding than I think people understand. I think this is a good time for us to like actually transition to our concrete experiences. And
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear what you have to say next to Alice.
Well, I don't have concrete experiences yet, but I do have things that I was like, that I'm still super excited to explore and like wrote about. So different
Right.
stages, of course, but yeah.
No, that's great. And I think like what's so interesting and some of the stuff that I want to touch on here is like you go in with ideas, and even if you do, and in my case, in many respects, I had some concrete visions that I wanted to at least try, or some things I actually wanted to get involved with. But I do think that I don't know, Alice, if you recognize any of the faces on here, by the way. But
I don't think so. I was like trying to before, but
yeah, so like I'm like looking at the Y Stanford, and I knew I wanted to like expand all the humans that I knew. I felt like I had a good network of friends and it was awesome, but like I had a feeling that this place would be pretty special for that. You're seeing like just on this like page here, you're seeing like my work. You're seeing like that's the letter that Kirsten Moss actually sent me when I was accepted. So I thought that was cute. But I also met her, and she like I would say went way beyond expectations, because you really don't know what you think. You know, when you think of an admissions officer, someone who's running admissions for a school, maybe you think of someone who's got to be like hard nosed or like got to make some hard decisions all the time about who to cut and who to keep. But she was just absolutely lovely and such a consummate pro, and also just like really thoughtful in everything that she put together and everything that she wrote out to every single person who did actually get in. And you can tell because the handwriting is the same, by the way. So I think there's some awesome stuff there, but seriously, like the people that I was able to meet at GSB, like Shawan, top left, Jen and Eva in the next picture, like these are three human beings. Like I have no idea if I had ever crossed paths with them. Where they're all completely different personalities, and I would say all completely different personalities from myself, but they're all really thoughtful, working on cool shit, and they care. And so I think that was the general synopsis of that. That's the chess club we started in the bottom left. And then that's the beer pong league winning victory. So Alice, you don't know about beer pong league yet, maybe, but as fraternal as it sounds, it's both everything you expect and nothing you expect. It's easily the most significant accomplishment I've ever had in my 30 years on planet Earth. But it's just a great way to just hang out, and everybody gets together and goes out one night on, every Thursday, and it's just a blast.
I'm ready. Hey,
Yeah,
aren't there like costumes and stuff? Like I hear that it's like very people get
yes.
into it.
If you look really closely at this shirt, it says, my shirt says his name is Al, and his shirt says my name is Al. And our team his name was Al Organ, and our team's name was Al's Organ. So we would either dress up as like organs or like actual pianos for every event. It's the stupidest thing in the world, but the uniforms were killer for everybody. And then the bottom right there is giving a talk. So speaking about a lot of the soft skill stuff that I had no idea I'd get involved in. Like really reconciling a lot of the most challenging parts and some of the most exciting parts of my life, and being able to discuss that and talk about that really openly and do so in a candid way in front of like hundreds of people is something that sometimes I don't even like, you don't even realize what you might possibly be comfortable with until you're actually there doing it. And I think Stanford facilitated that. And you get some really powerful shaping experiences. I would say of the dimensions of things that I went in with and what actually came out, I would. What's
I
that?
was gonna ask you that. I'm glad you're touching on it.
No, it's perfect. So I would say I went in with like so much energy around the startup space, and like I wasn't like running around like yelling at people about my startup idea. Like, don't get that picture, but like I was like really actually generally excited about it. And to give you an example, Alice, maybe of like something that I went into GSB thinking I would do, and then how it actually manifested. I went in really wanting to work on a startup that helped people who are formerly incarcerated get jobs in the real world. That is like the thing I worked on the most. If there was one problem that I worked on the most before GSB, it was that. and I did, for example, Startup Garage. And I was literally like COVID had just happened. It was kind of absurd. So in many respects, a lot of the things that we were trying to do like had to go virtual. But through that process, I met this guy named Harley Blakeman who runs a company called Honest Jobs. And he was at the time going through Techstars. And we talked for like 2 hours, and I was working with like on him on some side project. And then time passed, and a couple months later, ended up in the impact fund, and it was the first year of the justice team. And that was my only investment that I cared about. And I was like, we're going to bring Honest Jobs through Impact Fund, and we're going to make it happen. So every single week we pitched it. And every single week I was like, this is going to win, whether we like it or not. I was like calling him for like, we got 4 hours, like a 4-hour call one time, just like him driving through the Midwest, and I'm just on the phone. So we made it happen. He got the investment from Stanford, and then he's been off to the races since. So like, but like I didn't.
That's awesome.
It was actually pretty dope. And like, I didn't know anything about VC. I had no idea when I stepped foot on campus, but I got a grant called a Smith grant through GSB to work for a company called Beyond Capital for the summer. And then that next year joined the Impact Fund on the Justice team, knew a little bit more about what I was talking about, and actually understood the VC space a little bit, and then got that investment through. So a million other hands were involved, but like that was actually something that I feel like I led to some degree. So it was exciting, and helping the world, doing stuff, like it just changed. Like your life and the things you want to do change. And so after I was like, I worked for a cancer diagnostics firm that was doing machine learning for basically they would aggregate the opinions of physicians and try to come up with an ML algo that could better predict diagnostics better than actual doctors, and they were way ahead on that. So I joined that after GSB, and then transitioned to my own startup a couple months after. So like you don't know what that's going to be like, but if you just care about solving problems, like allow the things you're passionate about to emerge, and then go try to work on those problems. It's my MO. But I'll stop there, Alice. But that was like an example.
Well, I have a couple follow-ups for you that I think could be helpful for our participants.
Sure.
So one, you mentioned Startup Garage. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the other startup classes, and maybe why you did that one instead of like Lean, or I don't know, any other one. And then the second question is about the fellowships. So you mentioned a grant. Can you touch on maybe any other fellowships that you looked at or that Stanford offers for startups?
No, great stuff. There is a design immersion fellowship, I believe. There are also actually Shawan, who's in the top left there. He's going to love that I'm plugging him.
Awesome.
Top left, he won like the big grant that Stanford gives out to nonprofits at the end of the year. I believe 3 people. I believe Abdul Hamid, Shawan, I don't know how the heck I'm forgetting the third person, won a grant. Basically, I believe it was $100,000 for their nonprofit. So that's a game-changing grant. I could be getting those numbers wrong. There's a post about it. I'm sorry if I'm slightly off, but Shawan's awesome. And I think like most schools, you just don't offer that kind of scale or caliber or targeted level of grant to the right people solving really exciting stuff. So I think Stanford offers some massive end of year grants. These like Smith, like these summer grants for especially things that are social impact oriented, to me, they're just awesome. I mean, basically anybody at GSB can apply for them. And if you're really serious and you lay out the case, Stanford will pretty much fund you. You obviously have to keep your ducks in a row, and you do have to secure offers, and you have to like make things happen, and then be on time with everything. But hey, it's an amazing thing. It allowed me to understand VC, impact investing, like try my hand at a few things, and ultimately like those skills directly translated into opportunities that help Stanford, myself, and the people that were involved in the work. So I think that's what I have to say on the grant pieces. As for the startup classes, Alice, I took Startup Garage and Design for Extreme Affordability. Design for Extreme also was like part COVIDed. So it was tough towards the second half of it, because everyone was just adjusting to the earth. But it's a really cool class that I think you have to reapply for once you get into GSB. It's that competitive. So I did not know that, but it's you better know what you want to do, and you better move fast to do that. But it's an amazing program, and you kind of get paired up basically with people from the design school, from the engineering school, and you work on a product, and then you help people who are doing socially impactful things work on a product and build a solution in an environment that is resource constrained.
This is Design for Extreme Affordability.
Yeah,
that's the one. Wow, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, it's one of the more I think it's one of the more interesting crossovers, at least personally, from with the D school, and like they work on some really exciting problems, and they have his name is Stuart Colson, who runs it. Just a great, really thoughtful leader at the helm, who integrates and makes that program work and makes it run. So some great folks over there. Again, back to the humans. Alice, there's one last thing, just because you know what, like I'm usually doing these 45, 60-minute events, and we got a little time today. You know, you got a little time. So
Me too.
I was thinking also, like, I really want to touch on the soft skill stuff from my time
Yeah.
at GM. Again, I went in like, I'll be honest, like I think, frankly, like a lot of white dudes, kind of rolled my eyes at this. I was like, I don't like, I'm a regular dude. I'm not coming from a crazy amount of money or anything. Like, I should just be a regular person and stay grounded and hold to my values. Let me tell you what, touchy-feely kicked my ass in the best way. And I think it showed me a few things. One, I have no idea all of the things that actually go into being a good person. Two, I can clearly improve some things, and some of these things are actually easy fixes I can just get started on right away. And then three is the amount of patience to actually be good at listening is so high. You need to be so much better than you think you are. And I think that while it didn't all happen at once, I think that the classes that especially the interpersonal dynamics, touchy-feely, that class in particular, I think laid a really good foundation that helped me in a kind of a compound interest. You don't always see it, but the results come later kind of way in building and repairing a lot of the relationships in my life. And I think it has had ripple effects that I could not have possibly expected. And I think it also accelerated like personal maturity, just kind of just better at living life. So it meant a lot to me. And I actually really leaned into the class. Like I spent a lot of effort outside, just like literally reading books on the topic. It just kind of was like a different, again, you're from Queens. Like we don't learn this shit. Where the fuck are we gonna learn this? Like this is a thing. Like we don't learn that stuff. We learn how to like argue and say funny stuff. Like that's what we know. And so I think like it was pretty eye-opening for me, and I think like really helpful just for life. So that's the last thing I'll say on that. I think it takes if you feel like you don't need it or you feel like you don't want to do it, you're probably the exact person that probably should do it. So it's one of those like circles of that's very forgiving in the end. So those are my thoughts.
I'm really interested. I think I could be better with my reactions to certain pieces of feedback. And I hear the feedback is very blunt. And so I'm really excited to see how I can transform the way that I react to feedback that I don't love.
That's a
Face
great
to
goal.
face.
And that's a great goal. And some of the things that are not you, but like, in general, like sometimes it's our ability to, for example, think really quickly and process information quickly and respond quickly and accurately and with some real depth. Sometimes that can get in the way of our full potential. Like intelligence sometimes can be a mask for a lot of things that you want to do or want to experience or feel. And I think the last thing maybe about touchy-feely is like I actually realized I was good at some stuff. Like I'm actually pretty good at identifying emotions and articulating them and helping people see them for themselves. And I think a lot of my personal things that I grew on were not unrelatedly, Alice, like emotion regulation, how to communicate, how to say something, not in the way that you say it, but in a way that the other person's like actually going to receive it.
For
Like
sure.
those things they sound simple. They're so hard to do.
And I just don't think I didn't encounter any other program that would have that kind of, and that is part of my why. Yeah, good. So this is predominantly made up of things that I had mentioned in my Why Stanford essay, and I will just touch on the way that I went about my Why Stanford essay. I think I got some really good feedback from Will Torres, which was, it's not just about GSB. It's not just about the MBA. Like why Stanford? Like why the community of Stanford, everything the university has to offer, like what about it is important to you in your journey. And so I wrote a decent amount about the Stanford School of Medicine. There's a race and mental health lab that I really wanted to be or would like to be a part of or involved with. So that was one of the things that I really that I didn't really see anywhere else at other schools, and Stanford is a pioneer in. So that was really important to me. The Impact Fund, I'm super interested in being involved with the Impact Fund. They have an investment. They recently invested in this company called Hue, which focuses on Black women's health and wellness. And I was like, yes, like I want to be a part of, a fund that, identifies important things like Black women's health. So I'm really excited about that, and would love to talk to you, Ben, about how to get involved with the Impact Fund. The other thing that I'm actually really interested in pursuing.
Alice, you can book an intro call if you have
Yeah.
time.
Oh God. Sorry, that was good. The other thing that's not on here that I'm really excited to, I don't know, try to pursue is Views from the Top. I had listened to one of the episodes about the founder of Bonobos from Views from the Top, like way forever ago, and just found it, I don't know, it played a big part into what ultimately became my What Matters Most essay. And so I feel some weird connection to the podcast. I don't know why, but I would love to kind of just be involved with that. And again, just like the funding, I think there are a lot of schools who have great entrepreneurship programs who offer a lot of funding, but there's something about Stanford where I think the funding is, there are more dollars, but there's also, it's not like, I don't want to use the word expected, but it's like such a normal thing to be getting funding for a startup there, that I wanted to be in a space where oh, of course I'm working on this idea all summer and I'm getting paid just as much as maybe my peer who's, doing an internship at a bank or something like that. Maybe it's not the same amount, I don't know, but I just wanted somewhere where it was valued the same. Like my intellectual curiosity and pursuit of, something interesting was, put at a high value. And I'd say my general why Stanford is really, I needed a place to reset where I felt like the idea of exploration is, embraced. And so I think a lot of people go through Stanford and they're testing hypotheses throughout, the 2 years, right? And so whether that hypothesis is VC, you do a VC fellowship for 6 months, and then maybe that doesn't work out, you realize you don't like it, so then you try the operating space and you love that, but then you still try, to start a company, right? And so I wanted to be somewhere where I could try these things and not feel like I was holding myself back by not committing to one particular thing immediately, pre-business school. I'm not pre-recruiting like my friends, and I wanted, and I think there are people at Stanford who pre-recruit, but I wanted to feel okay completely exploring and knowing that, okay, if I fail, I have a huge safety net. I've failed at Stanford, right? It's not a failure. I tried, so I think that was a really big part of it too.
I love how the ground we're covering is so complimentary, and we totally didn't practice this. This is great. So I think the quote here is really great, and I would emphasize the word giant in giant safety net. It feels really good. Yeah, student loans are real. But I felt like certainly the Stanford community creates there's a lot of energy there, and sometimes with energy comes friction. That's true. But I will say, like any community, by the way, you're gonna be in some ways with MBA stuff, we all reorganize ourselves into advanced high schools and sophisticated high schools. So expect stuff. But I will say that I think when you the easiest part and the best part about Stanford is the vast majority of people you just kind of generally hit it off with, and there's some way to establish some fun common ground. So I just kind of felt like I could drift between so many different friend groups and just bounce around and just have really awesome, unexpectedly cool conversations with people from across the board. So
what percentage of your class do you think you met, and then what percentage do you think you got really close to?
I have a very tight circle for really close, but I will say I'm just thinking of, names are coming to mind. I would say I met 98, 99%. Maybe there's a couple people. Well, it's also 400 people, right? It's
wow.
I feel like I met almost everybody.
Okay.
And that's also like Alice, you may know this stuff yet or may not, but there's stuff like like BPL on Thursdays. There's stuff like
Yeah.
so foam. I don't know if you know foam. Maybe you do.
Yeah. I think it was in Vegas last year. Or
Yeah,
is
so
it
there's a Vegas
is
foam every year, and then
oh
there's
it is Vegas every year. Okay.
yeah, but it's almost every week. Like there's a people go out and everybody contributes to it, and we all go out and get together and stuff. Foam stands for so RJ Miller is the award given to like the person who's number one at Stanford, and foam stands for Friends of RJ Miller, which is like the play on like yeah, like everyone else is out, like RJ is studying. But anyway, it's there's so many ways to get to know everybody, and like I think percent I got close to. I would say I feel like I'm close and still with like 10 to 12 people, which I think is awesome. Like we're talking like lifelong friends. Like I talk to them every week and many of which I talk to every day. I would say I am friends, like actively friends with like 40 or 50 people. And for me, that's a shit. Like for me, that's way too many people. So
That's too many people for me too,
yeah,
honestly.
feel like yeah, and then you know what, like any given week, like I don't know who I'm gonna talk to, but like a friend of mine crashed here this past weekend while I was away. You know, and like I would put her in that bucket for sure. So there's like a lot of cool, there's just a lot of cool ways that you can come through for each other too, because you're at a stage of life where you're like you have a couple resources at your disposal and like people care about each other, and so that's just like that's my general take. Good questions though.
Excited.
Cool. Cool, cool. Yeah, it changes so much though. I think like I was like, you have a Y Stanford now, and you're gonna look at it like in like 18 months, if you were like at school, you'd look at it like, oh honey, right? Like you're like, oh honey, like a couple of those, like every like 6 to 8. I'm kidding, I'm kidding. This makes
No,
total
you're
sense.
probably right. I don't know, but I'm like open to the change. I'm embracing the fluidity and exploration stage. It's
No,
okay.
of course you are because of the department that you have listed on the left. So that makes a ton of sense. And I think the thing is like if you the people who do the best at Stanford and enjoy it the most have a way of looking back at what they thought the world was and being like, oh, okay, wow, that's interesting. I changed so much relative to my vision. And some things stay the same, but much of it will shift and evolve. And then not like getting lost in comparison. Because the thing I always say is you're gonna face people like I know who they are. Like there's plenty of people in my GSB class whose starting line is past my finish line. And that's fine with me. And I think the more that you can stay in your lane and like work on stuff you care about and like spend good time with people that you care about, the more you're just gonna love the time there.
We have
Um,
some questions. Oh, I see you're looking at them.
yeah,
Um,
let's go. What'd you put?
no, yeah. So one of them is, oh, this one just came. Okay. How could you have both how could you have both a rewarding experience at Stanford and staying focused? Sounds like there's a lot to do. This is a great question for Ben.
Oh,
I'm also curious.
yeah. And let me tell you what, I haven't heard anything that deep from iPhone 193 before, but iPhone 193 is here. That is probably the thing I struggled with the most, especially for the first 3, 4 months when I was at Stanford. Um, really, really get good at saying or thinking to yourself, if it's not a definitely, gotta put it on pause, gotta say no. You're gonna have 473 recruiting events, 90,000 social things, 12 people inviting you to a trip who you just met. You're still just moved in. It's a lot going on. I really, when I break it down, I still am from a small town, that kind of level of change and all that stuff. I go, oh man, I need a second, gotta go inside. So to the extent that like this stuff is a lot, it is a lot. All of it's going to hit you at once. And so I think the more deliberate you are and the more you force yourself to say no to stuff, the better you'll be. More
Thank you.
change means boys.
Um, I don't really know how I'm gonna manage autumn quarter, but yeah,
You
I
just,
think it's gonna be if it's not a hell yeah, it's a I'll get back to you.
I would say it's like one of those things, Alice, where you're like, you just like, if you can just do simple things before you get there and just get to-dos off your list and like
Yeah.
that's nice. A lot of people do a pre-MBA internship. I like funded myself and went to Egypt for a month. I think that's the move. Enjoy your time. Enjoy the freedom and the open space because there's less of that at Stanford, except for when you go on those hikes. So it's an intense experience, but like it in some ways it feels like a pressure cooker, and like I think the people who are there are ready for that. But I think if you really if you dial your busiometer up too high, the place is not fun. If you keep it at a normal level, it can be really, really great and really.
I'll keep that in mind.
Mhm.
So we have one question. What was the age demographic like? How many over 50, for example? I'd assume that would be more executive, like the executive program for over 50, but
Over 50
I
is
don't
too
know.
high. Yeah, I mean, maybe one, maybe a couple in their 40s, I would say, which I think is cool. It's great. Yeah, that's it.
Do you have any advice for veterans that plan to apply, enlisted or officers?
Yeah, really lean into the network. I would say network is really big here because you have a clear alignment, I think, in terms of life mission, which you put your time into, and the people who may have gone to GSB. I think you have a much higher opportunity to reach out to people. I also think if you're a veteran, like make it when, especially throughout your application and essays, like make your experiences felt, make them real, bring your like don't get lost in the jargon, don't get lost in the mechanics of things per se. Like I think really getting serious about the impact that you had, because it's in some ways unlike any other kind of impact you can have in any career. Defending the country, for example, no matter what way that counts, doesn't matter if you've never left a computer, doesn't matter if you were like actually out in the field, like all that stuff is not only incredibly impressive, but deserves to be said clearly. So to that extent, those are my first initial thoughts on like applying if you're a veteran. Other thoughts, Alice?
No, I can't speak to this, but I agree with you network wise. I think my friends who were applying were definitely networking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We have one more question. Did you feel comfortable sharing that you plan to explore different options in your essay, or did you elaborate on a specific path you can envision working in post MBA? I can start with this one. I think I tried to structure everything as like a long-term goal and a short-term goal, and then like things that I wanted to do while at Stanford and how those could get me closer to either of those goals. And so it just so I didn't like talk about I guess I didn't really talk about different careers that I wanted to explore, but more so different paths to get to the ultimate goal. So my ultimate goal was, to start a mental health startup, and the short-term goal was to work at a startup in strategy and operations, like a mental health startup in strategy and operations. But there are a lot of things that I wanted to explore. So whether it was, investing in mental health startups instead of operating, or operating itself. So I think you can do that, but I tried to keep everything connected to a short and long-term goal. What would you say, Ben?
Well, I think that's part of why you got in. I think it takes time. I think it takes time and effort to figure out, like, all right, I have this goal. What are the actual steps I need to take to get there? You can't really do that in a rushed application. So that's one thing I'll say. Also, I would say that there are a lot of paths. You can approach this a little bit more like a hypothesis-driven exercise where you go, okay, what is my best guess right now of what I'm passionate about? And like I mentioned earlier, and in the kind of mini tale I told earlier, like I had an idea of how I might impact a particular space before I got to Stanford, and it actually couldn't have been less like the path that I had envisioned, but the outcome was at least still in directionally the right place. And I think they care more about what are the problems that you are solving, and why are you a good person to be solving those problems? Less about what are the specific industries and functions that you can, that you're going to go about achieving that problem solving with. You should include potentially some examples, but I think that matters less than like, what problem are you solving? Why are you that person?
I think that's great. We have another question where this is from Amber, and she says, hey, I have a generic question about SAA if we have time. How do I search for the right stories in a fairly eventless life? I doubt that's true. I am a consultant, which feels very common for applicants. So I worry about not being able to stand out. Ben, I was listening to one of your events like earlier in the summer, and you said something that was like, it doesn't matter like if you're doing something that everybody else is doing like in your work, but it's about how you're doing it. And I just thought that was so great. So I'm gonna let you take this question.
Okay, I'm gonna try to remember what I said. So I think there is a one line I heard actually in 2020, April 2020, when I was visiting campus. No, wrong. April of 2019 when I was visiting campus for like admit weekend, and someone said it to me really succinctly, which was, if you do a traditional path, you need to have done it non-traditionally. You have to have put your own spin on it and defined it. And I think to that extent, like if you say you care about healthcare, or you say in your application you care about fintech, and you did one project in your time in consulting at fintech, it's like, I mean, okay, like the thing that's going to happen is your admissions person is going to go, I see that you're excited. You have not provided the ample evidence needed to state that you are the person to solve that problem. Why would I believe you over somebody who's worked in fintech for 4 years, or somebody who's actively working on a fintech startup? So remember that your path, and in some respects, your success in this application in general, you got to do good work over and over again. You got to bust your ass. You got to be initiative. Like you have to be like proactive in finding the nuggets at wherever you are that you work. And I think for me and McKinsey, it was like, I found a way to get on a fellowship, like get a fellowship for like this nonprofit program that I was really excited about. At McKinsey, I was like, I really want to work on some of their prison related work, and I think it's really meaningful. There's no openings. Okay, I'm going to attend every session that this office ever holds on this topic or anything even related. I'm going to meet those people. I'm going to reach out to them, not because I care about advancing my career, not because I think I'm so smart and so cool, but because I want to express that I'm passionate about this. And I trust that if I continue doing work, in this case in workforce development for a nonprofit, that I will find some through lines that I can carry through to that next piece and to connect them. So when you are at your job every single day and you're asking yourself, what are the opportunities? How can I just work so hard so that everybody around me feels, yeah, you'll go the extra mile? Those are just some things that you can't replace in an application, and they're going to show up in your essays. They're going to show up in your recommendations. So I do think there's just a straight up like, but you got to bust it. Like that element of working hard. And I don't want you to compromise your health at all, ever. But I do think there's an element of like, you need to put in thoughtful quality hours consistently and take initiative when the opportunity presents itself. I don't know. I don't know if there's a better answer, but increase the, you know.
That was great.
Okay, hopefully it was better than the last one. Okay. Should we talk about this essay?
Yeah, I think we should.
So what matters the most right now? How do you think about approaching this question? Okay.
How do you repeat that? What was that?
How do you think about approaching this question? It's so loaded, like crazy question.
So I went about it. I think I had multiple different ways that I could have gone with the essay. But I think what was most helpful, like the exercise that was most helpful was listing out my brand points, like a branding exercise, because listing out the brand points, but then also having anecdotes that related to that. And then from there, I was able to kind of find a common kind of thread. So I wrote about being a big sister, and not just in like the literal sense, but in the like metaphorical sense, I guess, throughout my life. And
Alice,
I think
maybe it's me. I think I lost your mic.
You lost my mic? Can
it
you
could
hear
be
me?
me though.
Can everyone hear me?
If everybody else can hear Alice.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I'll just stop there. That's kind of how I started with brand points. How did you kind of go about your what matters most? Oh no.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can now. This is great. Did you just pass it to me?
I did just pass it to you.
Amazing. Okay. I didn't hear anything you said, but I can promise you it's better than what I'm going to say.
I don't think so. I think you probably got it
down. Maybe I'll just talk a little bit about like how I think about tackling the essay and like how I think about going at it. I liked your thought around developing brand points. And one thing that you can kind of have a litmus test as you go through this process and ask yourself, like, if someone were going to summarize my application in 3 words, could they even do it? And if the answer to that is no, maybe consider how you can like precisify your brand a little bit or condense and focus the things that you're writing. You don't have to do this, but I think in some ways, like, remember that you are in a pool of, in this case, over 6,000 human beings. And if you can distill out like this person's about, like in your case, like mental health innovation, maybe that sums up your application, but I think that could be a really powerful one. And maybe you are that person for that problem. For me, I think it would be like policy reform startups, something like that, or policy reform. I don't know what it is, but it's in that realm. But I also think there are some really good like questions that are about the formative elements of your life and what actually, less so the, like, people focus on the what matters most and get fixated on that part of the question, but it's the whys that drive this essay. It's the actual evidence from your experiences and the things that helped you extrapolate what matters most to you that I think helps set you apart. And articulating those reasons for your admissions committee is really exciting, because you can say what matters most to you is resilience. That's great. But why? Like, I'm interested. If the experiences themselves make it clear that you are, in fact, a very resilient person and you've been through it in many respects, then you can use that theme and it's powerful. If you just say what matters most to me is resilience and the examples are like, you know, I worked past 8 p.m. one time, it's like, all right, well, we have more resilient people that we're going to admit. So I know I teach in a freaking 2-hour thing on this specific essay. So I think there's so much that goes into it. But I think like asking yourself questions about the formative periods of your life and figuring out what you actually care about and the reasons behind it. It's the essence of this essay, and anything is fair game. You do not have to restrict yourself topically. So quick thoughts. Cool. We want to talk about why Stanford, or if anyone has any other quick questions. The only questions I think we want to table are questions that are like, hi, my specific circumstances are X. These are the 4 things that define my application. How do I write my what matters most essay? Try to think as you ask questions, especially around essays, of which questions can be generalizable for everybody. Alice, how did you think about why Stanford?
Yeah, I'd say I definitely, well, I'll just echo kind of the points that I made earlier, which were just thinking about Stanford as a whole, not just the GSB, and being so specific that you couldn't like use that essay for anybody else who was applying or for any other school. And I think a lot of that came from talking to people, whether it was Will or current students or alums, and trying to figure out, you know, not just like, oh, Stanford has this, but kind of like, why was it important to me and why did I care? And how could it help me do this thing that I want to do? Even though I could do it without Stanford.
I like that. I would also add, there's a kind of 3 fundamental things that I think like you can think about answering. It's like what is attracting you to Stanford? What are you actually going to contribute to campus? And then what are you going to do after? If you can lay out those things to admissions in a clear way and it flows, meaning the actual experiences serve as evidence for the next thing that you are doing, then I think it makes a lot of sense. This stuff here's some quick hitters, guys, that I would totally avoid. Please don't just list a bunch of classes that you want to take. Please don't just name drop someone that you talk to. Please don't just like randomly like write some topic that you're excited about solving and just kind of give like a lecture on AI or some like thing that you really love. Everything needs to be why Stanford, but like why Stanford for you? Why, like, what are you specifically going to lead and take advantage of while you are on campus and afterwards? So that Stanford goes, wow, we have to meet this person. We have to understand why they're so driven to solve these problems and what they could actually do for us. To that extent, I think write your essay with a very targeted mindset where if it doesn't really all tie back to the question, like, no, you don't have to include that one executive education or random class that you took from Stanford that one time because it doesn't tie into your main vision. Or if you spoke to a random alum, but it has nothing to do with your application narrative, I don't even think you need it. I think the only stuff that should make it into this essay are clear and discrete reasons that you care about this school and that you're going to do something with this school. So I maybe have a little bit of a strong opinion on the why Stanford essay, but I've seen so many ships adrift at sea when it comes to this that I try to help people just sail the Panama Canal and try not to go too far out. Alice, what else do you think?
No, I think all of that. Someone said something to me where I think maybe it was my consultant back in the day. I think a lot of people kind of try to write this in a way, forget that it's kind of like it is a love letter to Stanford. Like you're not like it's a weird way to say it. Like you're not groveling or anything, but you are saying like this is like I can't do this anywhere else. Like this is the best place for me to do this. Like this is so I think keeping that in mind as well, kind of when you're writing.
Yeah, you know what else? I think there's a couple things that to go even one that I didn't do this, but some of the applicants that I've actually been working with, I noticed that they were doing it, and I noticed how useful it was, and that this is the people who actually have also gotten in. Not only were they talking about, maybe this is because the bar is going up, but not only are they talking about the type of stuff that they want to get involved in. Like I think they turn the get involved in thing, like I want to be involved in the tech club. It's like cool. Imagine you were leading the tech club. What would you do differently? What are the things you would drive? Why? What's different? What is missing? What do you want to double down on? I think that takes your research a level further. And just to kind of answer iPhone 193 is once again absolutely just groundbreaking question. I think to go a little bit deeper, turn the nozzle up from I just want to be involved in this thing to if I were actually at a place of authority or decision-making capacity, what would I do in this role? And lay out maybe what you would do in year 1 and then year 2 of your MBA. A lot of people, again, those more advanced applicants that I'm talking about, like they did that. And I was just like, yeah, like if you talk about what you're going to do in your first year being involved in the impact fund and then how you're going to take that experience and evolve it into maybe like a portfolio ops role for them, that's cool. I think that's awesome. And I think that level of like if you can give Stanford admissions a higher level of definition on the TV that is you, that is a really, really, that's a really, really positive thing in general for your application. Just the thing to always remember about why Stanford, it still needs to tie back to your previous experiences. Change lives, change organizations, change the world. That's the motto for the school, right? Sure. The one that I think matters even more for the Stanford application is the past. The best evidence for future behavior is past behavior, and they say that over and over again. And as stupid and simple and behaviorist as it is a really a useful thing for you to think about as you write an essay for the future. It shouldn't feel random. It should feel like it flows from your experiences. Okay. I think we went a little deeper there. I think I actually answered the question. Did I answer the question? Incredible. I've never done that before. How do we integrate these 2 essays, Alice? I don't know. What do you think? I think we touched on this. Did you have any thoughts about like when you were, because this is like a little bit more recent for you, like how do you think about like how these essays work together?
Oh, I'm actually a bad actually no, sorry. They did, but it was like I think it was too subtle, but maybe it wasn't to the outside person. But so in my what matters most, I had different vignettes of when I had pretty much played a big sister role in a like health related event in my life with other people in my life. And then my YGSB was to like solve this bigger role of increasing mental health representation in Black communities. And so it did actually flow, it did connect very nicely, but it didn't feel like it did when I was writing. If I'm being honest, I felt like it should have been like more stark, but yeah.
I think that's fair. I also had a few things I felt throughout my application, and I think everybody's going to feel this to some degree, which is not every piece of your application is going to be the freaking craziest thing, the greatest thing in the world. Yeah. Not everything's going to work super seamlessly. Honestly, even some of the people that I have worked with on their applications and have helped get into the school, I was like, you know what? I didn't think that essay was that amazing. It was the best that we could put together. But I didn't always think that every piece of every application is the greatest thing in the world. Remember that it's holistic. Remember that these things that like, not everything has to be like so crystal clear. Sometimes it's a drafting process. I don't know if I summarized that well, Alice.
No, I think you did summarize that well. No, I think you're right. like, I think there were a lot of things, especially just coming personally, especially just coming from the background that I was coming from and like what I was trying to do. A lot of things just didn't really line up perfectly at all, not even like tangentially. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think you said
So there's also, I think you were deferred, yeah?
no, I was not deferred. I applied round two and
Oh, me
uh
too.
yeah, wait, sorry, do you mean 2 + 2? I either way, I was just like a regular round two applicant that felt like less than because I was applying round two, which
Yeah,
is total
I did.
BS.
No, I'm also round two. This is us failing so badly. The round one and round two makes no difference. Everybody's got to calm down. It's a crazy thing that it's like out there. I have like I hear every single cycle. Round one, you got to apply. Round two is lower odds, and I'm like, there's no data to support this. I was still round two. Nobody I know has
Bullshit.
anything. It's all bullshit. Yeah, exactly. Bullshit's a good word for it. Um, perfect. I'll stop talking. I think if I were to summarize this slide though really quickly, I would just say like because I'm required to because consulting. What matters most to you and why? What do you care about? Why do you care about it? Why GSB is and. So you're going to take what you care about. How are you going to channel that for yourself, for the people around you, for the world at large? If you can do that, you're answering these two questions. Ideally, they flow between them, but I don't even think my two essays necessarily were like simpatico in terms of topic. Maybe they spoke in the same general true north, but it wasn't like one began, one ended, and then the next one started, right? Like it didn't have that feel to it. In fact, they were pretty different stylistically.
We have a question that's not related to the essays, which I don't know if you saw, but can you discuss how the awards tie into the application? There are 3 separate sections for awards: extracurricular, academic, and professional. How do they tie in?
Yeah, I think they're like kind of like a nice little bonus, nice to have. I don't think that they're like a major thing, but I think they're awesome for highlighting things that you've done that maybe you would be a little bit awkward to squeeze into an essay. I also noticed we actually are. This is the worst I've done with time management. I want to move through a couple of these other slides if that's cool with you, Alice, as well.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So really fast, supplemental essays. Do the impact essays. They're optional. Do them all. Do all 3 of them. It can be one-on-one impact, could be organization level, could be a small group, could be a team, could be professional, could be extracurricular, could be personal. Typically, a mix of all these things is great. But Alice, maybe you want to speak to an example or some other facet of this, but do the.
I did one personal, I did one at work, and then one entrepreneurial. That was my breakdown.
Nice. I think I did 2 different volunteer ones and one professional one. So you can mix and match these. I've seen all shapes and colors of these essays. So there's no restriction here in terms of topic. I would say that ideally one skews professional extracurricular, and it's not like 3 one-on-one things. That would feel a little bit tough to verify, if that makes sense. Okay, the optional background essay. I think what's good about this essay is it's a little bit more cultural upbringing focus. Your what matters most essay does not have to be about your childhood. It does not have to be about the things that you grew up with. This essay is for that. I actually think this is a really good place, for example, for FGLI folks, for people who may be coming from circumstances that are a little bit harder to define, or maybe for someone to understand. They give you a space for you to put it in your own words. I was working with somebody, for example, from like a poor rural community, and like he doesn't necessarily fall into a lot of different buckets, but I think he's had some really interesting life experiences that were worth articulating in this essay. I will also say, Alice, this is not the like optional essay where you describe circumstances to explain a low GPA or something like that.
Yeah, I actually don't know if I know this optional background.
I think it's new.
Okay. I mean, I remember writing an essay about like my like be FGLI, but maybe that, but I thought that was like 50 characters or something. I didn't think it was like an
Yeah,
essay, but I might
this
new.
one's a little
Wow.
expensive. I think this is in many ways an essay for folks with who identify in some kind of way or are trying to explain something about their life that I think doesn't meet the eye. So
Oh, it's great.
yeah, I think it's actually, I also think it's great that they separate it out because it's such a discrete, important topic. And you don't want people to feel as if, for example, let's say they identify as X, that they have to write about X in their what matters most essay.
For sure.
I think it's important they do this.
I agree.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that is a good summary of all the stuff, all the words that we just used. I want to quickly, we have a couple slides. I'm just jumping ahead in this deck here, just to see what we have left. I think the last meaty section that we want to touch on, we have recs and interviews. But and I'm also, by the way, I'm happy to go a few over for anybody if they want to stay a little on. I don't know if it's possible with the Leland platform. Maybe Amanda could help us with that. But I want to touch on letters of rec and interviews. Alice, how'd you go about thinking about your recs? What were the parts that were clear to you? What are the parts that were maybe, you felt like you did well, or some of the more challenging pieces? Anywhere you want to go with this?
Oh my God. So I didn't use any recs from my current employer. So that was very just anxiety inducing overall. But I think what I did really, really well was my timing, like how much time I gave them, how early I started, and my recommender packet. I don't even think they read every page, but it became part of my brand of okay, she really cares about this and she put a lot of time into this and it's visible. And then just doing regular coffee chats with them. So I'd say I think I maintained the relationship really well throughout, and articulated kind of why I was going to business school and why they should, be my number one fans, which they already were, but.
Oh, great point though. Which is they already should be your number one fans.
Yes.
The letter of recommendation process, this is not your time to turn your work career around. It's already happened. So the time to do the great work is the last couple of years that you've been working. It's not 3 days before you ask them for a letter of recommendation. So let's put that as table stakes. One thing I also will say is there's a million exceptions. There's a million things. Fiona, unless they especially point out that you cannot reuse a recommender, you absolutely can. One thing that I would always remember about these applications, especially with the recommender piece, these schools ask what they want and they leave out everything else. Required 2 letters. If you send in 3, you will have 2 reviewed. If you send in 1, that's not 2. One recommender should be your current direct supervisor. There are exceptions. For example, if you just started a company that doesn't make any sense, probably go to your most recent direct supervisor, or potentially get an advisor or board member of the company. If you are running a family business, I probably wouldn't go to your mom or dad if that's what's happening. I would just try to find somebody else who supervises your work or helps you and mentors you in some way. There are a range of different circumstances. One thing you can be sure of is that they have seen all of them. You're not the first person to ever have a specific recommendation situation. Worst case, I imagine you can reach out to admissions, but I would just check your circumstances with a couple different folks before you do that. Get people that have managed you. The most important thing I can emphasize is get people who actually have seen your work and have seen it regularly to write these letters. Do not get a fancy senior partner in lieu of a direct manager. Do not go to blah. I didn't go to the mayor of Chicago to get my recommender because you know what? He wasn't the guy looking at my work every day. He wasn't looking at anybody's work every day. He could barely remember what he was doing every day, and I don't blame him. I got people who actually I was working with, deputy mayor, deputy chief of staff, who were actually supervising my projects and helping me and telling me when I screwed up and telling me when I did well. So those are the people that you want. And part of the reason is these slide titles are really great. Part of the reason that you want this is because the questions are going to be specifically targeting things that only a direct manager or somebody who has really supervised you closely can answer. The questions are, what makes you outstanding relative to other applicants? What is the number one piece of constructive criticism that you have seen? And then another optional section for ability to talk about your character and your potential. They can't do that if they're your partner, and they'll only be able to write a vapid, vague letter. Okay, I went on a little bit of a soliloquy there because I'm also trying to get through the last few slides here. Alice, do you want to talk about maybe the recommender mix that you had?
Yeah, so I had, they were all from work, but I rotated. So I had one from my first employer. She had been my manager only for a year, but we had a close relationship. And then from my second job, I used two different people. One who was a little bit more senior, and the other one who kind of had a more of a direct reporting relationship with me. I just didn't have like a nonprofit person that I could use as a recommender. Like those were the people that I was closest to. They were all from work.
I think that's a good. I also think, Alice, you might be hinting at the fact that like if you're not nervous to ask, but like if you don't even know if the person has a good impression of you, I would stay away. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I totally agree. I mean, I think you're still nervous to ask because they could say no, but I didn't ask anyone that didn't feel like they would go to bat for me because it's ultimately what they're doing. And it's the only piece of written outside perspective that they get, like the admissions gets. So you want to make sure it's really, really, really strong. And also, everybody else's recommendation is going to be really, really strong in saying that, Joe's like number one guy everywhere all the time. And so they need to kind of know that going in and, be able to compete, quote unquote.
Yeah, totally. I would still encourage folks like you want your recommender to pound the table, but they got to be real. Like they got to be accurate. They can't like. I think there's a temptation, especially to like exaggerate the language. Like if your recommender can speak discreetly to the stuff that you did, you're in great shape. Talk to like I built this prep packet thing that it's like on the screen in part because I also think there's a lot of misnomers about what to put in each specific letter in the recommendation. But know that this is your recommender being asked to answer discrete questions of character limit, 500 words a piece for the two main questions, and then going through and grading you in many ways on a scale. So this is not like an open letter to the president where you can just air your grievances or something like that. This is not what this is. It's concrete. So just something to remember as we go through. Okay. Oh, I'd love to know about your interview. I feel like I'm interviewing you right now. I just keep asking you like, what was this like? What was this part of your like experience like? So
I thought my interview was awful. I like cried after my interview. So,
wait,
but it worked out. It was totally fine.
you thought it was awful?
First of all, it was my first interview. It was the first interview I got, and I hadn't been doing any prep because I had just turned in my applications, which don't do. Keep prepping, I guess. Yeah, it was I thought it was really bad, and if I could do it again, I think I would just be more prepared. I would have like run through my anecdotes more and been like just more chill. I think I got defensive because like GSB, unlike HBS, for example, will ask you maybe 4 or 5 new questions in the time of your interviews. And all the other questions are just diving into one specific thing that you said that was probably like one sentence long. And I think I was just kind of like, I felt like I was, I don't know, pleading my case when that just wasn't the purpose of the interview. So I think that's why I didn't feel like it went well.
I so hear you. I still have no doubt that it went well.
How was yours?
Yeah, I would say first off that the HBS interview feels like a multiple choice test. The Stanford interview feels like an essay to me. I felt like HBS, it was like 20 questions and like it was just constant hammering of like random things from across my life. And I understood that they were digging in at some places, and I think their probing was they're excellent at interviewing. But I felt so much more comfortable and at ease with the Stanford one after the first 10 minutes, which were an absolute grilling. And I think in some respects, like really good and hilariously, my interviewer actually, I think ended up being my biggest mentor, both at GSB and now. She's an amazing person. And I think like Alyssa's helped me in so many ways. I can't, from personal to just like such amazing advice. So your interview is also a chance to meet somebody and potentially know somebody. And I think that's pretty freaking cool. But it was very intense. She asked me everything from like very specific tactical things, I think, to gauge my political acumen, savvy, from my, through my current role, and then asked me to like really articulate a lot of my experiences in detail. But I do feel like after about 15, 20 minutes, like I started to feel comfortable and just eased into the natural ebb and flow of a very dynamic conversation. So you really should be prepared for, like, I think Alice said it perfectly, like those four or five big questions on that could be basically anything, but it's really what's going to be the tail of the tape is how well you respond on the fly to their more interesting questions that are follow-ups from that. Alice, I don't know if you had this experience. My experience was I am speaking to somebody who is so much more intelligent than me, so much more experienced than me. I had that feeling the whole time.
Mine was like the former CFO of a public company.
Yeah, it's absurd. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Yeah. We're applying to business school with no business talking to the person that we're talking to in some respect. It's just crazy. Yeah. Know that we were all nervous. You should be nervous. It's part of it because you care. There are ways to prep. I think there's other resources available for that, but I think the last thing is we just wanted to quickly just thank everybody for joining. We tried to touch on every part of this application. There are a million things to talk through. I believe, did I skip the deadline slide? I think I did. I hope these dates are still right. I think they should be.
Yeah, those are accurate. Yeah.
Okay, I skipped the slide out of fear that I hadn't updated the dates.
No, I updated it.
You rock.
We're good.
Guys, first round, September 10th. Second round, way further away in January. Deferred is like April 8th. So you kind of can apply in many respects at every stage, depending on where you are. But I would say, like, quick and dirty for everybody who's going through this. If you haven't finished your GRE or GMAT yet, and you're like not so sure about your essays and you're still talking to your recommenders or figuring out that part of the process, apply round 2. Alice and I are both round 2. You have the same odds as round, right? If you are done with your GRE, GMAT, you've already got several drafts of your essays, you're feeling good on recommenders, it's about pounding out the applications, you probably have the option of going round 1 or round 2. But honestly, the simple, practical reason of earlier is a great reason to apply round 1 if all your ducks are in a row at this point in the app process. Alice, any thoughts here?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on round 1 versus round 2. First of all, I started a couple of things, like organizations a little later. And so applying round 2 just meant that I had more time with those organizations. So that was kind of one of the reasons I applied round 2. And I mean, also the second reason was I just wasn't ready. I took the GRE on January 1st, 2024, and applied to Stanford on January 5th, 2024. So, and it was my 4th time taking it. So I wasn't ready. And I think I have a lot of clients who are really, who really want to be round 1, and it really is just a myth. And you should have. And I think the other thing with GSB too is that people are interested in Knight Hennessy, and they'll say like, and I thought about this too, where it was like, okay, like if I want Knight Hennessy, I have to apply round 1. But in order to get Knight Hennessy, you need to get into Stanford, which means you need a strong application. So you shouldn't be applying with a weaker application round 1 just so you can get Knight Hennessy. Yeah, so those are my thoughts.
Give people a quick and dirty on what Knight Hennessy is. Scholarship program for
people doing like joint degree. So if you wanted to do like a PhD, like a joint degree at Stanford for 3 years, you would be funded through this fellowship for all 3 years. But there are also some really great, I think the cohort is awesome, and there's some great like leadership benefits as well, in addition to the fellowship. Yeah.
Fiona, total myth. They wouldn't ask for either score if they just didn't want one of them. So don't worry. I think if you get a high score in either one, that's great. I would say something I have learned a little bit more about, just I think I'm, coaching on the side for a bit now. I would say, if you are coming from a more traditional background, I would say take the average and add a couple points. I think it matters a little bit more for people who are coming from like the banking, private equity, consulting worlds. And if you are coming from like, I guess, nonprofit land, like there's just less of an expectation that, let's say you have the hardcore quantitative skills. That would be something that you're not necessarily expected to bring to the class. But if you're in banking, you better have quant skills. If you don't have quant skills, you can't swim in banking, let alone thrive at Stanford. So I would say that just for some traditional folks, I would just say to really, really take the time to make sure you have that higher score. The lion's share of the bad applications that I have come across for MBA, not because the people weren't qualified, but because they were poorly put together, are rushed round 1 apps. It's people who are trying to cram it all into round one. I'm almost glad I didn't even know what, I think I was telling you before. I didn't even know what GSB was when I was applying until 8 weeks before the deadline in round two. So I was almost like forced to do the rush process. Let me also tell you what, guys, rushing sucks. Yeah, it's the worst. It's like the worst thing ever. And there's so much more work than you think there is. There's so many more little things to do. It's so annoying in some respects, but if you give yourself the time and you space it out, my analogy with this is always like on some recipes, it says, let's sit for 30 minutes. Let the sauce marinate. You need time for your ideas to gel. You need time for you to think through what you want out of this program, or whether, as someone put in the chat earlier, whether you even should be applying. So thinking about these higher level questions, I think takes some time before you get concrete as well about, how do I fill out these essays or something like that. Okay. Cool. Guys, these QR codes work as they look. You can scan them and look at our profiles. Really exciting. But I think, yeah, let's jump to chat too. Yeah, Laura, that sounds like a good time frame. 6 months early is a good time. I would say you have plenty of time. Time moves fast though. Keep moving. Don't take, if 6 months really means like you're on a crazy work grind for 2 months and then you have a family trip for 2 weeks and then you come back and then like, oh my God, life, like then you really only have 3.5 months. So like be super honest with yourself about like how much time you have when it comes to like time you can dedicate to the apps. If you have 6 months that you can actually dedicate in large part to these apps, plenty of time. Cool. Some good things. I would say that application strategy. Alice, what do you think about like app strategy if you're nonprofit, non-traditional? I don't think the application strategy in general changes, but go for it.
I would guess I would just think about the like the things that you would be talking about, like the like your the projects you would be talking about would be slightly different, but I don't think the strategy itself needs to be any different. I think you may want to like try and show that you have quantitative ability if that's what's going to knock you, given the non-traditional background, or that you can handle a business school course load. So maybe that is the difference in strategy, spending a little bit more time trying to show that you can do that. But nothing else besides that I can think of, at least.
Yeah, that's great. Also, just like allow the things that are naturals, double down on the strengths. You're working on a mission, right? Talk about it. I want to know why you care. And I think you have a more natural, like, you know what, God bless them. But if you're coming from banking, you got to do a little bit more work for me on why you care about what you care about. And if you're coming from like a nonprofit, right? It's just truth. So,
It's true.
Okay. Cool. I think we've got everything here, y'all. I think we've got
Any advice for young candidates? I think this is our last one, maybe.
Yeah. For young candidates, this could apply to people who are deferred or people who have a little bit less work experience, maybe. But I'm going to start with deferred. I would just say people care about commitments. They don't care about occasionals. No one cares about your 2 weeks for Habitat for Humanity. But I do care that you spent 6 months working for Habitat for Humanity. Then you took on a junior board member role. Then you got actively involved in helping spread Habitat for Humanity or for a year across your campus. Show longevity in the things that you are committed to. One really deep experience goes further than 4 surface level ones. So for young candidates, I would start saying like, start building those commitments, figure out what you're passionate about, figure out where you can dedicate your time, figure out what you want to contribute to, and lean into it. You may need some experimentation. That's totally fine. But just remember that your resume is a summary of deep commitments. It's not a summary of just all the things that you have ever touched in your life. Cool.
I'm just putting in, I don't know if you have discount code for this event, but I'm putting in mine into the chat right now.
Yeah. Thanks, Laura. Let's see. Yes. So there are also those Leland Plus ones, which are just Leland being awesome. And just, yeah, I'll copy paste the one from Amanda earlier, actually, as well. Maybe she's already got it. Yeah, boom. Okay, Amanda's so fast. I literally was copy pasting it and she beat me. Yeah, so those codes, guys, like whatever you grab on Leland, like you just get that money off of it. So they're useful. Which codes work like that most of the time. Usually you have to subscribe to an email. Okay. Alice, I think we covered a lot of ground here.
Yes, we did.
I'll just say from my side, thank you all for engaging, for joining, for great questions. I hope this was helpful. Also, just like big thanks to Alice. I think this was just like really easy to do. So thanks for being great.
Thank you. This was awesome. Great learning experience for me too. You're really good at this.
You know what? You know what I bookmarked though? Because you said that speaker was forever ago. Remember that guy, the Bonobos founder? Yeah, he spoke the year after I graduated. So you know what? Bookmark. Bookmark until next time.
What, two? I guess two. Okay, yeah. Sorry. In my mind, this was a long year. This was a really long year.
It's fair. Also, COVID was not part of the 2020s, as far as I'm concerned. It was
That's
an
true.
different dimension of life. So,
Agreed.
good stuff. Yes, thank you guys. Hope you find this. The recording should be available after the session. So if you had to tune out for a part of it, or if you wanted to share, view it later, just feel free to grab that. But thank you again.